Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? All right. So a little bit of my thunder has already been spoken out into the world, and that's what do you do when laws don't work, when the enforcement is weak, when agencies are reluctant, and so on and so forth. And my presentation focuses on that mindset. When there's the law is not being enforced, how can you make that budge? And how can you change that reality? And I think a lot of people, when they think about the law, there can be an immediate reaction of like, okay, you need a lawyer to bring a case, and then the lawyer will handle it. But that skips a lot of steps of what regular everyday people can do with law, with legal knowledge, with legal information. And at the end of the day, litigation a lot of times is not either the fastest way to get the resolution you want, or maybe any way at all to get the resolution you want. I'm familiar with a community in Maryland that they have a former biohazardous waste facility, or they have biohazardous waste in their neighborhood. And that facility that dumped that waste there, they researched and developed anthrax and other really nasty things, and that's just in the ground, leaching into the groundwater, causing cancer, causing all kinds of problems. And the community put their hope into litigation that dragged on for over a decade. And everybody was like, okay, we just wait for this case, our lawyer will take care of it. And then they lost. And after they lost, it kind of like gutted them. People hope that you get this vindication of like, okay, this is real, we deserve better, et cetera, et cetera. And when that didn't happen, their community movement, their sort of like momentum of building power, that took a real hit. And it took them over another decade to sort of start to rebuild. And so the idea is that litigation, it's not the first go-to. It's not necessarily a go-to at all. And even when it does work, when it is helpful, it's really important to remember what the community can do with law. And so I'm going to talk about a couple examples where we see what communities can do with legal information and what kind of progress is sometimes possible when you have people merging the power of the community and growing that power with legal information. So the first of these is, Sabrina already mentioned it, Shutdown NEP. The Shutdown NEP campaign in Ivy City here in DC. And for anyone who doesn't already know, National Engineering Products is a really plain-looking building. It has a small sign that says National Engineering Products on it, and it's right next to and connected to a residential home and a neighborhood, the residential part of Ivy City. And it's been there since the 1930s, the Jim Crow era. They manufacture industrial adhesives using all kinds of toxins, known carcinogens, this, that, and the other thing. And they've been there operating for close to a century now. And they have basically gone untouched that entire time. It's a remnant of blatant environmental racism, and it continues to be there and continues to poison the community, even as the family that owns that company has built intergenerational wealth. And Parisa, credit you with this really, really powerful. This white family that lives in a posh part of Maryland has built intergenerational wealth on the backs of Ivy City and this historic black community. So we and my organization, Namati, started working with Sabrina and Parisa and the Empower DC team, and that's National Engineering Products. And we started working with them, and we're hearing about these complaints and this frustration from residents, including the neighbor who lives right next door. And we worked with them, just started researching, okay, what are the, odor control regulations in DC? This is something you can just Google. This is something you can just like go on DC's own website and find out about odor control. And we discovered there's a way to make complaints, and there's a way to get service requests, like Ms. Sharon was talking about, on odor control issues. And these complaints, they're not just like call your elected official, call your legislator, and let them know about something, or call, have a conversation with somebody about something. It's also something that goes into a database, and you get a reference number, and they're supposed to take action on it. Whether they do or not, that's a totally different thing, but you have a record that is accepted by their database, and they're supposed to take action. Every city agency goes up for oversight hearings every year, and those numbers of how many complaints they got, how many did they resolve, how did they resolve them, those are all part of their oversight records. And they're supposed to use, or that data is used to show how this agency did. Are they showing improvement? How many cases have they closed out, et cetera, et cetera. So this database is really, really critical. And then on the other side, when a company like NEP applies for a new permit or a renewed permit, they pull up, the Department of Energy Environment, DOEE, will pull up that record, or whichever agency they're asking for a permit from. They'll pull up that record and see how many complaints there have been. And a lot of times when folks don't use that system, a company like that that's terrible can go into their permit review and say, like, look, we've been a good neighbor. There's no complaints against us. We have no problems in this neighborhood. So this kind of engaging this process, even when it's really frustrating, even when it's, you don't get an answer to every single complaint like you're supposed to, it's really, really, really critical. So one of the first things we did when we started working with Empower DC was we put together what we call the complaint campaign. And we found out that DOEE was going to host what they call an environmental justice tour in Ivy City, like 2 weeks after when we discovered it. And we said, let's see how many complaints we can get together in those 2 weeks. So we worked with Sabrina, and we found out the exact process, which is convoluted and difficult, but you can go on the 311.dc.gov website, or you can use the 311 app, or you can try and call 311, although that's a little iffy. That's possibly the most complicated one. And we've got folks to file as many complaints as we could, and this involved including like Sabrina walking and talking with folks, like working through the complaint process to make sure they got filed. And we organized almost a dozen complaints in less than 2 weeks. And if that maybe sounds like kind of a modest number, like in perspective, that's after decades of nearly zero complaints against this facility. So suddenly in less than 2 weeks, there's boom, there's a dozen complaints against this company. And then DOE came with the EPA. They did an environmental justice tour. We pushed the media to let them know about this. We also mentioned how many complaints have been filed in the last couple weeks. That got picked up by the local news, which got more attention, which got more officials interested and paying attention to the problem, including the EPA, including the DC Attorney General, and you started to build momentum. One government official, one of the DC government officials, if I remember right, even told us, hey, you guys are doing a really great job with this public pressure. So we took that as a signal that on the inside of these agencies, they need the public pressure. It's not just like what the law says, it's not just what's on paper, but they really need people to push and the media to help make the problem very real. So that was the flyer we were passing around during the complaint campaign and pushing to get complaints together. And then now there's relationships with all those agencies, with different officials and so on and so forth, and really ability to work collaboratively. NEP is still there. It shouldn't be there. It should not have been there for decades now. It's still there, but Empower DC is working with them. We're working with them. I'm not with them. We're working with agencies and officials that we now have relationships with to push for more creative and more effective ways. All right, I have 5 minutes left. I'm gonna try and fly through this. This is another example of another community we've started helping out a little bit, and they're in South Baltimore, Curtis Bay. They're a poster child for environmental injustice. They're possibly or definitely the most polluted neighborhood in the state, in Maryland. They have multiple polluting facilities, including, you can see this playground, that's at the Curtis Bay Recreation Center. And in the back is a huge coal terminal that wafts coal dust every day into that playground and into the entire residential neighborhood. The residents from a next door community were all permanently relocated in the 90s because the facilities there just became too many and too toxic. And Curtis Bay now continues to face those. And is Toby still here? Yeah. Toby. We have somebody from a local community organization, South Baltimore Community Land Trust, who's been working with the community to fight against environmental injustices and to fight for economic justice. And one of the things that they do is they provide tours to student volunteers to show them what environmental justice looks like. In January of this year, they were driving by around the neighborhood and they saw this building and they saw this thick black smoke coming out of it. And in the interest of time, I was going to play this video, but you can see that that's obviously not right. And that's, the person recording the video actually says that, well, that's not normal. And it's not even smoke coming out of the smokestack. So this is the largest medical waste incinerator in the country that imports medical waste from Canada to burn it in Curtis Bay. And we've been doing a little bit of research on what exactly, what is the legal situation of this facility, and it's a story of, community trying to force concessions or trying to keep something bad out of the neighborhood, but then it seems like a lot of powerful interests. It's a story that I think everybody here knows, unfortunately. But that didn't stop SBCLT from working on it, and that shouldn't stop anybody from working on it. So SBCLT started talking to the neighbors and the businesses that are right around this incinerator, and they got the agreement of one of the neighbors to put a camera on their property pointed at this facility that automatically takes pictures every 30 seconds or so. And so they could record exactly what was going on. And they have, basically, they can do like this really fast, like a time-lapse video of everything that's going on. I've borrowed some of these slides from a presentation that SBCLT made to Baltimore City Council, because they now collected this evidence just by themselves, and they could show it to the City Council to explain how bad the problem is and how often it happens, how long the smoke lasts, and all of this really, really compelling information. They can take it straight to elected officials, put it on the official record, get hearings, and push for media coverage. And from that hearing, they got one of the two major customers and one of the two largest medical companies in Maryland to stop sending waste to this incinerator, to commit to it publicly. And they said they will phase out all of their waste that they're sending to this facility. They also got the Maryland Department of Environment. They sent, so these are some pictures of every day, some of the days that they were able to capture these smoke events. And then on March 14th, in early March, SBCLT sent these pictures and resident information and testimonies to the Maryland Department of Environment, and the Maryland Department of Environment brought a case to enforce against the incinerator, ordering them to clean up or investigating their violations. So what happened in both of these cases, and what did they do that helped budge, help make the system budge in some way? First of all, they discovered a problem. And then once they discovered that problem, they started researching the problem, just finding all kinds of different ways that that business or that facility might be responsible for compliance in some way or another, or what restrictions they might be under. This requires a lot of, just like creativity. They think, okay, this is a business, so do they have a business license? Do they have land use permission? Are they putting things into the air? What should that look like? What does that look like? What are the restrictions around what they can put into the air? Flying through these because of time. And then just thinking creatively about any other requirements and restrictions that the company might be responsible for. And then thinking about how to make those complaints or how to gather information and who to share it with. Like, what are the appropriate channels? Sometimes when there's sort of, collected action around a problem, it's a little bit misdirected, or it's not directed in the most targeted way. Like, you have to find out which agency is supposed to be doing this and which agency is responsible for it, and so on and so forth. And then what did they do with that information? They educated and they organized their community around it. So this is I think the really sort of where the magic can be, is where you integrate the legal information into community organizing strategies. And you organize many neighbors to file complaints. You organize many neighbors to take pictures and send it to the agency, or send it to public officials, and so on and so forth. So you're really sort of melding these two things and using the power that's in the law or the regulations combined with the people power of many, many people doing and saying the same thing and reinforcing the message so that you can get some action. Now I'm going to end very, very quickly with this quote from somebody who I really look up to and I have the honor of calling a friend. And I put this here for two reasons. One is to think outside the box about law and regulations and what normal people can do with them. And the other is that the foundation of everything, including using the law for change, is that people need to move together, and that's why it's called a movement. The law is just words on a page, and it doesn't have meaning unless people, unless the community, unless residents make sure that it does have meaning and push agencies to give it meaning. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. I think you actually touched on my question, and my question was also it was going to be for Lynn as well, but how do we take care of the people in between the lawsuits? And I think we talked about it when you said educate and organize, but so that one part meets the material needs, getting the lawsuits to go forward, and even better if there's action and there's resources coming into a community. But as Lynn said, it's a big, big gap often between that. So how do we take care of a community, the people's needs, those non-material needs that human beings need met in between these big gaps? And you did touch on it, but if you and any other panelists after you, including Lynn, before you, can expound on that, because that's where we often find ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that briefly. I think really key piece, and when you see some of the most successful and really memorable and powerful efforts around community organizing and using legal tools, is that the base, or let me say it this way, the legal part is one part of many. A lot of times it's based in mutual aid work, in child care and job force training and the kinds of things that organizations like Empower DC are doing in the first place. And this constellation of different groups that are providing for different pieces that they can together. And then the litigation, when it's necessary, it comes in and it adds to that, but it's not the whole thing, or it's not the main ingredient. It's just one thing that's building on something that there's already a foundation, there's already this immense care and effort and tangible efforts that people are making to provide that care and provide for folks' needs overall. That's a really good question. Anybody else want to try? Yeah, it's sort of like we would love to know the secret sauce to getting things printed. I think part of the answer has to be an understanding all of the complexities around this because of the bandwidth limitations, especially for freelance folks who are looking for the stories to be able to make a livelihood. But that deeper connection with not just the story as the story, but like the community, like being able to talk about individual people as if they're friends because they are friends, because you know them, you've spent time with them, you understand what they've been going through, and to be able to like convey that and do that sort of, you know, going beyond the really sort of like quick, what is the story here kind of a piece. I realize I hear that that's a huge, you know, issue within the industry as well. But I think that having that real connection so that the storytelling is real and genuine and authentic, I think is a really key part of it. Thank you, everyone.